Hello and welcome everyone to our review of Reboot, the TV series from the 90s. I'm Paul,
And I'm Dave.
and we don't have a name for this show. Oh well.
No, not as of yet.
Alrighty. So, first episode of Reboot entitled The Tearing originally aired, at least in Canada and the US, on September 10th, 1994. Now, you know what this means, David.
Possibly.
What was the number one film in America on September 10th, 1995? Whoops, I went to 95, not 94.
That's a little bit too far. You have to go back a year.
Okay, what was the for 94? What was the number one film?
God, I was such a young child, though. I don't remember the things of that time. Or at the very least, what would be popular around then.
I guarantee.
Like,
Okay, I won't say that I guarantee you've seen this film, but I would be shocked if you hadn't.
the only one thing that I could supposedly think of would be supposedly one of the Indiana Jones movies at the time, but it's kind of a case of trying to catch up with super popular things, but only what's on video cassette at the time, not what's in theaters.
No, so this was Forrest Gump.
Yes, a thing I know of, have most likely watched, cannot specifically recall, but know of very familiarly.
Okay. Oh wow. Okay, I would assumed you would have seen Forrest Gump. Anyway,
I'm sure at one particular point, but it's kind of a case of, hey, I saw this thing. Is it going to remain in my brain? Possibly the one or two things about it, but all the rest of it, probably not.
alrighty. Let us move on to the number one song in America this week, Dave. 1994.
Oh,
Who was topping the
boy.
charts in September?
Like, the one specific default answer is what I was most likely bombarded with when I was that age, which was mostly boy bands and other particular things at the time. But I don't think they really jumped into popularity at around that point.
Yeah, I wouldn't call this a boy band.
Mm,
Any idea? I would call it more like
no, there's
soul
nothing
or
that's
something.
immediately jumping out.
Alrighty. It is, the song is I'll Make Love to You by Boys to Men.
Yeah, that tracks. You just say the thing brought the entire song back to my head.
Alrighty, and
And I'm
finally,
mostly just wondering what the heck they're using that song for nowadays, aside from the obvious.
moving along to video games for this week. So, we have one release for notable games. I'm not going to bring up everything. Anyway, the only notable release is Mortal Kombat 2 on the SNES, which was the, like, castrated version because. Oh no, this isn't the castrated version. They actually left the blood and fatalities intact on this.
Indeed, it was mostly just a case of if they wanted to actually ship the actual game, they had to place the specific coding and whatnot on it so that it doesn't show it. But then they could easily put in a cheat code or whatnot to actually bring that back.
Yeah, yeah, this was actually like the real game, not like a castrated version. Anyway,
Yes.
let us get into Reboot Episode 1.
So I suppose the first question there, Paul, the one particular thing, was it too much of an issue of how the show decided to introduce itself and give kind of a introduction to this world?
What introduction? They don't give you an introduction. They just throw you in. And they're like, "Fuck you."
Yeah, pretty much.
There is so much. Okay, I watched the show a ton growing up, right?
Yes.
And as a child, I didn't care about a lot of these things. But as a 33-year-old adult, I'm like, "But why?" I ask that question a lot.
Understandable.
Okay, so the episode starts with this alleged introduction, which isn't great, but it kind of introduces the world. Basically, the entire series takes place in a computer, and there's this
Yes.
mysterious user who loads up games and stuff. And for some reason, Bob feels compelled to go into these games. Although we're never told why or what will happen. Like, we're never told why he has to go into them. But apparently, if the user wins, part of world that they live in, which is the computer, is then destroyed, which makes no sense.
Yeah, there's most likely reasonings, but nevertheless.
Okay, so Bob is something called a guardian, which is basically like he's basically like an antivirus program, but he's
Yeah.
really shitty at it.
Yeah, kind of his first kind of big project to kind of work on after getting shipped out of the main box that he most likely came out of.
Like motherfucker, he's like about as effective as McAfee. He's like, hey, there's a virus there. Are you gonna do anything about it? Nah, not really. Okay, so Bob has his two friends. So there's Dot, who is the older one, and then there's
Yeah.
Enzo, which is her little brother. Who, oh my god, Dave,
Child characters in television series,
I wanted to strangle this child.
children in cartoon series.
It's so annoying. But at least he's not in this episode a lot. Okay, so
Again, there's business that needs to be taken care of.
yes, so Megabyte is this virus who tells Bob that, hey, if you do this favor for me, I'll like leave you and your friends alone. And Bob's like, I don't think I
And of
should.
course, if you don't do what I ask, I'll cause more problems for you.
Yes. So Bob is like, what? He goes and speaks to, oh, what was that? Um, Fong. That's the one. Oh boy.
Yeah.
um, 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 Fong is
You most
maybe.
likely have words about fog. Let's hear them.
Uh, look, there are certain things about the show I will not pick on because of its age.
Okay.
One is the animation, which
Understandable.
I get it at the time. This was like groundbreaking television animation. I understand this.
In comparison to most everything else that was on around the time, most definitely.
The only other one I can think of that was maybe the same time was the Donkey Kong series, but that might have been a few years later. I don't know.
Eh.
Um, Fong though does not age well.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of a case of entire series inside of a computer. The essential main powering unit or processing unit of the system is ancient.
Yeah, but like they made him this like old Asian guy,
Yeah. Yeah.
and they
Additionally, if you need to ask a question to him, you have to beat him at a gang of pong.
which like that's kind of cool because it goes back to how old he is because like Pong is super old. Okay, that's kind of interesting. But
Yes.
like I don't have a problem with him being Asian. The problem I have is A, the accent,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
B, whenever like you like when they cut away from him, they do the like you know that Asian gong sound effect.
Yeah, Asian gong, couple other traditional
Yep.
instruments to give that sagely sound to the particular sorts of thing. Yeah,
Yeah, that wasn't a
yeah.
great look.
I had my slight bit of cringe. It's like, oh my gosh, it's nostalgic, but oh my gosh, it did not age well.
No, no, it definitely did not. So Megabyte basically tells Bob that, hey, if you do this thing for me, I'll leave you friends alone. Bob goes to see Fong, and Fong's like, you should stay away from him. He's a bad dude. And then Bob's like, I'm gonna go see Megabyte because I'm a dumbass.
Well, not completely. He brings forth the sagely advice within his categories: the keep your friends close and your enemies closer.
Oh yes, it's from
It's
an
like,
ancient README file, which I was like, okay, that's a pretty good joke.
then kind of the case of, well, I guess I'm gonna go visit Megabyte all by myself.
Yeah, so he goes up to Megabyte's lair
Yes.
and goes in, and he's all like, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna throw in with you, Megabyte. I swears it." And then Megabyte takes him into the super secret spot of his lair, and they have something called a tear,
Yes.
which somehow he wants to use this to access the supercomputer.
Yes.
How this all works, I do not know. I do not understand how this
Yeah.
all works, but okay, I'll go with it. So he needs Bob to do something, I don't know what, in order to stabilize this tear so that his army can basically invade the supercomputer and they can get a bunch of weapons from some armory in this supercomputer. Again,
As you know, virus is gonna do virus things.
okay, like it kind of makes sense, I guess. It's not the best, but okay, I'll go with it. The evil villain has an evil plot. Okay. And then Dot kind of just arrives, like hack and slash, grab her and bring her to Megabyte. I don't know why. Oh yeah, because they're stupid.
Yes, they're two halves of a whole idiot.
It's true. So they end up escaping, and they end up stopping Megabyte, like destroying the tear somehow through some game. I don't understand how this works. But there's one moment that made me legitimately laugh really hard.
Duly noted.
And it's when we're in Megabyte's lair, and it's a super quick background joke that I don't know if you saw it, but I hope you did. There's a spot where I think it's hack and slash say, "Oh, she was outside starting a riot," and then it cuts to a computer screen where you see two like programs holding up signs.
Yeah, two to three little people just holding up signs, causing a little riot.
Did you see what their sign said?
Oh shoot, not the specific wordings, no.
Okay, so one of them has a great sign, which is "Power to the Proletariat," which, hell yeah. The other one is the best joke. Dave, the one of them, I think it's the one on the left, has a sign that says "Smash the solid state."
Yes.
And I'm like, that's a fantastic joke for 1994. Well, good on you, whoever came up with that. So they destroy this fucking tear thingy, and Megabyte's all pissed. And then what else happens in this? I feel like that's about everything.
About everything. Things kind of go back to the status quo for the time being, and kind of a case of, oh man, this is a person to deal with, and how the show run is gonna supposedly go.
Yeah. What did you think of this episode, Dave?
It was nostalgic going back into the show
Yes.
and seeing all the particular sorts of things. It was one of the things heading back into this was how were they going to use specific computer lingo to either express certain ideas, give certain ideas of how computers supposedly work, and in some cases, some of it is decent, but mostly it's just kind of little word jokes, and again, with signs and other particular things that they show him with the joke is hilarious. But it's mostly just a case of either for filling in the position for particular stuff or hardly much of anything, which was mildly saddening, but also I'm pretty sure it was somewhat understandable just to have the story work in somewhat of a decent sense.
Yeah, there's parts of it where they're using like, oh, this person is like basically like analogous to this computer part. I'm like, okay, like, that kind of makes sense. But there are some good jokes in the background that I highly recommend. I highly recommend if you're gonna watch this, make sure that you can like pause at a moment's notice because there's another joke I forgot about. But early on, when we're in the diner, I forget who's talking, but somebody's talking, and in the background you can see a truck drive by.
Yes.
Dave, are you familiar with the moving company Two Small Men with Big Hearts? You've
Not
seen the
specifically with that one, no.
Okay, well, you see the trucks around every so often. Except
Mhm.
in the reboot universe, it's two small sprites with big CPUs.
Cute.
And I'm like, that's a legitimately good joke. Yeah, I thought this was fine. There are parts of it, like Fong, that haven't aged terribly well. And yeah, I mean, if you're gonna be nitpicky, the animation isn't great, but it's
Hmm.
also like
That's
30 years
definitely
old at
true.
this point.
Hmm.
And not all of
Though
it's
I think
bad.
no, it's definitely true. I think one of the particular things that I definitely really enjoyed watching was, in my case with this series, it was always interesting with seeing how the story and whatnot happened. But one of my favorite things about this show were its villains. And as it sits, Megabyte isn't my favorite when it comes to it, but he is resourceful. He essentially has an entire army ready at his beck and call to either stop the hero from doing what he needs to do, or his golden plan, invade the supercomputer to do what a virus does.
Yes. I will argue that Hack and Slash are better villains.
No, it's understandable. They are fairly good.
They
But
are
it
great.
is also a case of when bringing Bob to his lair to show him what he wants done, Bob knows, good sir, I do not want you to destroy all this particular stuff. That'd be stupid. And Megabyte straps him to a machine and shoots him toward the thing that will most likely kill him.
Yeah, and then he uses Glitch, which this is another thing where I'm like, is that a clever name or is it a terrible name?
Most likely one and the other at the same time.
Because Glitch is kind of like his get out of jail free card.
Yeah, pretty much. It's essentially the specific item that allows him to do his function and do a multitude of actions within the show.
But it seems to let him do basically anything.
Just about.
It's
It
a
does have some specific rules, but they are very, very loose.
Yeah, it seems like a bit of a Deus Ex Machina. Like it's like we need this to do this at this point, so it does it. But I will say I enjoyed this solely because of the nostalgia and like a couple of background gags that were pretty funny.
Mm.
But if this were a modern show, I would be much harsher on it.
Yeah, yeah, that'd be understandable.
But it does because as a kid I loved the show. But yeah, it's fine, and if you grew up watching it, you should probably go back and revisit it because it is fun. But if you've never seen
Mm.
it before, eh.
Yeah, most likely the traditional modern bias that sits now would most likely be one heck of a wall for entry.
Oh yeah, yeah. Alrighty, Dave. So did you have anything else about this episode?
I think at the very most, for the start of the episode, to at least introduce the couple of main players within the story, gives the villain some, at least a platform to stand on. Hasn't really gotten to his how bad of a villain he supposedly is, but at least sort of saying, yeah, this is not someone that you want to mess with, but still keeping it within the range of being at least a decent kid show, I believe, to sort of say it.
Yeah, and I mean, Megabyte is like a pretty well, like he's a well designed villain. I'll give them that. Like the design is really cool.
Mm.
And like he has his two little bumbling henchmen, which are fun. And yeah, I think he's a pretty good villain, at least for like a first season.
Mm.
We'll get introduced to somebody next episode, but we'll talk about that at the time.
Most certainly we will.
Alrighty, so until next time, I'm Paul.
And I'm Dave.